The Giants did it again. Another dramatic comeback win, another great performance by the bullpen, and they sweep the Colorado Rockies in Denver. Not an easy thing to do. And so coming up on today's show, I'm going to be talking with Paul Holden from Locked On Rockies to discuss what makes the Giants better than these Colorado Rockies specifically, and what is the future for the Giants this season now that they're getting on a roll.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, as I said, I'm going to be talking with Paul Holden from Locked On Rockies, breaking down the differences between these two teams, why the Giants are frankly a better team. Paul wants to know what specifically is going on there, and just the outlook for the Giants moving forward, coming off this sweep and pushing over 500 and a lot more. So without further delay, let's get into this great conversation I had with Paul from Locked On Rockies.
Today on the Locked On Rockies and Giants podcast, we are talking about two teams that I think on the outside perspective, people might not think, but for us here that focus on these, I think this series just shows how big the divide between these two teams is. Even though the Rockies had two chances to win this series, multiple opportunities, man, the Giants never quit. And that it isn't just on the field, they're in the playoff hunts. What is it about the Giants that makes them just constantly relevant? It drives me nuts, honestly. Why aren't the Giants ever fighting for the basement? And why are the Rockies constantly, Ben? Of course, host of Locked On Giants. I didn't really introduce Ben Kaspick here, the one of the best in the business when it comes to Giants talk.
Thank you.
That's why we had to bring him in. Why are the Giants just so far ahead of the Rockies, Ben?
Well, I mean, I honestly think back, though, to like 2017 and 2018. And I think that corresponds to when the Rockies were having some success and finishing ahead of the Giants and making the playoffs. And I might be a little off with the years by one or two, but the Giants did kind of bottom out. And in 2017, they lost 98 games. And so that year, I mean, you obviously had the early success in the 2010s, obviously. And they were in it. They never really had terrible seasons any of those years for a long time in the early 2010s, but they did kind of bottom out towards the back half of the decade. But what happened then was that their longtime kind of person in charge was fired, and they made a major shakeup, and they made a move to kind of pivot to be a team that is run more like the Dodgers, and we all witnessed, even while the Giants were having all their success in the early part of the decade, that the Dodgers were the team that was having the best regular season and most consistent success. And so that move there, when no disrespect to like Brian Sabian, who architected the championship winning teams, but they kind of didn't modernize. By the end of the decade, you were starting to see them bottom out and kind of be a team like the Rockies still is or are, whatever. But it sounded weird coming out of my mouth. But they hired Farhan Zaidi, who was literally the Dodgers general manager. And that's who they hired to be their president of baseball operations. And I would argue that little by little, they're kind of, the Dodgers, I watched your live show yesterday, and you were talking about how the Giants and the Dodgers are just two teams that just kind of really handle the Rockies. And I think there's some similarities in the style of play that just gives them advantages night in and night out against a team that's not kind of operating at that level, which is what I saw from the Giants in like 2017 when they lost 98 games. And so it's taken a while. I mean, they won 107 a couple years ago, but I think they're still trending upwards. That year was kind of a blip, but I
Right.
think they're still trending upwards.
That's what's amazing is the fact that 107 wins was kind of the outlier, but it's never been like, and like 107 wins is insane. Like you don't always have to get there. That's not necessarily, I think, always the goal to win 107 games. I think the Giants just kind of embody the mindset of we just want to be there because they're a team that I feel like is that kind of they're not in the same ways as Philly in the same sense of last year's. Just get us to the most important part of the season, and then we're going to be okay because we trust ourselves. Would you say that's the case? Do you think that's kind of the thing? I asked Miller Thomas of this. We did a crossover last week because the Diamondbacks are. I think the Rockies and Diamondbacks have kind of been hand in hand for a while, but the Diamondbacks clearly on a really solid upwards trajectory, whereas the Rockies are stalling. I don't necessarily. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Rockies are actively getting worse when they have a lot of do have some excitement stuff on the way, and we saw a couple of exciting things here in this series. But does it matter to win the NL West? Is that really the goal? In the expanded wild card? I mean, of course it's great. It's all fine and dandy, but I think you could ask a lot of Dodgers fans, they don't give a hoot about all those division titles when it compares to how many times they've fallen short in the playoffs. Do you think it really matters to be a division champion in the wild card era?
I mean, it's really interesting that you asked me that because I have been beating this drum for especially since the expanded wild card. Like, it doesn't matter at all. You are not even promised because now there's that new first round, best of three, and you can literally win the division and still you like two division winners get a bye in that round, but one of them doesn't. And so you could win the division and it makes no difference whether you won the division or if you were a wild card team. And there's certain like kind of loopholes where you end up maybe facing a weak division winner, like right now in the National League Central, you could be a wild card team that ends up facing that team as opposed to facing the best wild card team, which might have a better record. Like right now, the D-backs would be that first wild card team. And so you could be the bottom wild card team and get to face the Brewers and be the second wild card team and have to face the tougher D-backs. And so I don't care one lick. I mean, look, you want to hang the banner, you won the division, but look, at the end of the day, it's about winning championships, not about winning division titles. And so obviously you'd like to win the division. Obviously you'd like to get to skip around, but I think it's unrealistic with, I mean, the obviously the Padres are not doing what people expected them to do yet this year, but with the Dodgers and the Padres preseason, like in the division, I think you're just living in fantasy land if you think, okay, that we have to win the division. There's 3 other spots available to you if you don't win the division. So I don't care at all. And honestly, like I said with that scenario, like in some ways, there's a scenario where you end up playing a weaker team than you would if you had. I mean, not. I don't know. I just don't think I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it's just look. I mean, like Philly's the prime example, and the Dodgers are a prime example. It doesn't matter. You have to be. It's the best team. I mean, the best teams handle the adversity. And when I look at a team like the Giants, and again, these are the Rockies, and you can say whatever, but a team down 4 2 times on the road, those are big wins. This is a team that just stole 2 wins on the road, and if you're capable of doing that. And you can do that against a good team. You can do that in September. You can do that in November. That's gonna win you that best of 3 series. The Giants don't quit.
These were 2 huge wins for them, and you know it's been an uneven season. They started off slowly. They were like 7 games under 500 not that long ago, and they've kind of gotten hot. They cooled off a little bit on their last homestand coming into this series in Colorado, and so it was a big series for them to try to like get hot again and to come back twice, and just the way they pitched and held the Rockies. I mean, in that ballpark, to the job the Giants bullpen did in this series, like Logan Webb gave up some runs, Alex Cobb gave up all the runs the Rockies scored in today's game were in the first inning, and that was it. No more runs, and so the bullpen has really turned it around, and and it pushes the Giants 2 games over 500. So these were big wins for the Giants. Unfortunate ones for the Rockies, but big ones for the Giants.
Let's dive into more of what this means going forward. Let's take a look to about diving a little bit more into this series, what we liked, what we didn't like. As heartbreaking as it was for the Rockies there were things to enjoy, especially with 2 starting pitching performances from guys that have really needed to step up for the Rockies and have been filling in this issues of depth and all sorts of stuff. We are going to get to that coming up here in segment number 2.
This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't have to be so stressful. And for me, using previous websites that I used to buy tickets, it was almost always a stressful experience. And one of the big things for me is worrying about getting the best price. I don't know about you, but like if you're buying tickets in advance, I like to buy them in advance. And it's like, am I buying them too early? Am I waiting till the last minute? Like, it's hard to know when is the right time to pull the trigger. And with Game Time, those concerns are put to bed because they've got the Game Time guarantee, which means you will always get the best price. Because if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you not just 100%, but 110% of the difference. So snag those tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and when you use code LOCKEDONMLB, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
This is a special crossover edition here of Locked On Rockies, Locked On Giants. Paul Holden, Ben Kaspick here joining you. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on YouTube, and also on the SiriusXM app and SiriusXM. Just search Locked On Rockies, Locked On Giants. They also got you covered for all your play-by-play action, too. Just search Rockies or Giants. Select the feed of your choice. Ben, what did you like the most about this series? Was it the comebacks? Was it the pitching performance? What encouraged you the most going through here? I saw you tweeting a little tongue-in-cheek about the lack of home runs lately for the Giants, even though they're a team that I think I want to say over 20 more home runs than the Rockies do this season, and that's playing in San Francisco. The Giants completely eliminate the Coors Field narrative, man. I tell you what, that's the thing. What did you like? Was it the fact that the Giants can officially declare we have no fear about playing at Coors Field? What were your key takeaways from this series?
I think the biggest thing just has to be coming back and that it builds the confidence for the rest of the season, or at least for the next several weeks or months or whatever, that you're behind in a game early and there's no panic and you have this feeling that you're going to come back. And they kind of created that in the second game of the series, and it carried right over into the third game. It was like, it kind of just felt like, if you just limit the damage, because the Giants went ahead 1-0 in the top of the first with a homer. Rockies got 4 in the bottom of the first, but like the Rockies could have done more. There were in both games where they rallied, like Michael Conforto made a huge diving catch that saved a couple runs off the bat of McMahon. And
I believe Brandon Crawford had a big diving stop to rob Mike Moustakas as well.
Yeah, and those were huge. And it just had that feeling like if you just keep it within like 3-4 runs, it's Coors Field. You believe in your offense. Their offense is just kind of like grinding. And like in game 1, we could talk about 240 pitches that the Rockies threw. Which was
first time in MLB history a team has lost when they have struck out 16 batters and also, I believe, walked 11. It was a crazy stat. 240 pitches.
I know. It was absolutely insane. And so, yeah, like that game was its own kind of craziness. But then the comebacks, I think, for me, are the biggest thing, just because both times, I mean, it wasn't like one run comebacks. We're talking 3, 4 run comebacks in the late innings, and just the way that they did it, and that they didn't, sometimes you have a tendency to try to do too much, but they were like taking their walks, and the leadoff walk. I mean, yesterday and today in the ninth inning today, the 2 walks in a row starting that inning, and yesterday, both innings, the seventh and eighth, I believe, where the Giants got their rallies going and eventually came back from a 4-0 deficit. Those innings both started with leadoff walks, and so I know part of that is obviously frustration on your part and Rocky's pitching, but at the same time, like if you look back at today in the ninth inning, Blake Sable leading off the ninth against Pierce Johnson, he grinded out a great at bat where he was swinging at strikes, fouling off tough pitches, and just not swinging if it wasn't in the zone. And they kind of have guys like that up and down the lineup, and it puts a lot of pressure on the pitchers, which is what we saw extensively in game one, and it's part of what fueled the comebacks in the next 2 games as well. And so if that is the approach that they had in 2021 offensively, it was just like grinding out pitchers and then hitting homers, and the homers were coming early. They haven't come so much lately, but a couple of big homers won them this game today. They hit 2 homers and snuck out a little 6-4 win. And so yeah, but for me, just they haven't had a lot. I honestly think they were like 1-25 when trailing after 7 this season coming into this series, and they're 2 straight wins trailing after 7. So now they're 3-25. I know that probably stings to hear, but
yeah, I mean, it's what they do. It's when, especially with the Rockies, when they are dominant at home, they're so good at capitalizing on teams making the mistakes. It just is unfortunate for the Rockies that they were the ones making the mistakes and the Giants were capitalizing. If you give 2 leadoff walks with nobody out in the top of the ninth and you only have a 1-run lead at Coors Field, that's asking for trouble. Just absolutely, But that's what's so frustrating. The Rockies wasted 2 quality starts in this series where they had 2 starting pitchers come up, both of which aren't flashy, both of which aren't going to dominate you, but they went up against a professional batting lineup, like you said, a team that's going to grind your at-bats, a team that saw 240 pitches in the first game, and the Rockies weren't able to clutch up enough. A flash in the pan here of offense isn't enough. So for the Rockies, there's stuff to be encouraged by. I think Ezequiel Tovar has, is continuing to grow and develop and shine. Ryan McMahon had a solid series as well. He's continuing to hit the ball, and even when it got out, he hit the Joel DeGrace points out here. McMahon hit a few shots that broke the sound barrier, but went straight to someone. I mean, that's encouraging. There are things to be encouraged about by the Rockies, but when you're seeing these pitching issues, that's the issue on top of everything that we've seen. This is this overworked bullpen that has now been seeing these starting pitching issues, and the Rockies offense, they can't miss out on these opportunities. They never put the game away. Like you said, the Giants were able to keep the game 3-4 runs throughout the entire game, chip away a little bit, and then really take advantage. For the Rockies to improve, they got to end this. And I was looking it up. The Giants now, I believe, and I might are now. I think it was. I was talking about this after yesterday. So let me do my quick math. The Giants are now 32-9 against the Rockies in the last 41 games. Like that, you just can't count yourself as a series contender when your division rivals thump you that bad. The Giants continue to be just an absolute boogeyman for the Rockies, and I want to be encouraged by some of the stuff we saw, but it is so frustrating. I mean, Pierce Johnson has to be completely reevaluated as a closer. I don't know why he's continuing to be brought out there. He started the year strong, but he has shown issues. The Rockies desperately need Daniel Bard to get back in that closing role. He comes in for one batter, gets the strikeout. It's like, I know you're dealing with the anxiety and stuff, but Bardo, like, you can close games for this 5th place Rockies team. I think that's I'm hoping that's something that can help you build some confidence, because as much as we care and we want the Rockies to win, like, really the scales aren't, or the it's not that big right now. I just want the Rockies to be realistic about their situation, and I just don't know if we're going to see it. It was good to see the young guys play a lot in this series. Nolan Jones had a good series, hit a ball to the absolute stratosphere in this one, 484 feet.
Against Webb.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the Rockies just need to be willing to embrace this season. And I just don't think they are. What did you see from the Rockies specifically? Like, what do you think the Rockies need to do to beat the Giants in the next series?
I mean, in the next series, it's going to be tough. I just think, frankly, the Rockies have an inferior roster, and it's largely on the offensive side, which I know we've talked about this before, but like, just because of the ballpark, I think a lot of times people kind of always consider the Rockies like a good offensive team, but that's obviously not going to necessarily be the case. And so, yes, you've got some, like, Jones was really impressive, and McMahon like really he could have a couple of catches like against McMahon balls that he put in play could have totally changed the series. So you've got some players. I know McMahon's been like red hot, but other than kind of those guys, like we're talking. I don't know, the Giant, even the randos. You probably see like, who is Blake Sable, and
right,
even guys like that.
I say that Giants. Every time I see the Giants, it's who is this guy and why does he bat .550 against the Rockies? So who are these people?
They're better at talent evaluation, in my opinion. I mean, this is the thing about Farhan Zaidi, who, like I said, they hired from the Dodgers. He's the guy who like recruited Max Muncy, and he's the guy who traded for Mike Yastrzemski and traded for and by the way, like, they got Max Muncy on a minor league deal to the Dodgers. The trade for Mike Yastrzemski was for a guy who still hasn't made his major league debut, Thairo Estrada, who has become a really good player for the Giants, and they got him for cash. LaMonte Wade Jr. has been awesome and reached base 6 times in the first game of the series. They got him for a guy who's now pitching in Korea. And so, like, just their talent evaluation, I think, is superior. And the Rockies, like, they commit all this money to Chris Bryant, and that's been a huge disappointment.
He's on the IL again, by the way.
He's on the IL again, and just the numbers aren't what you like. He needs to be hitting like 45 home runs in that ballpark. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you put this Giants team in Coors Field, like, they would lead the league in runs by a lot. Like, just because I just think the Rockies offense is not quite, especially when they go on the road, they have a hard time scoring. The starting pitching was good. I mean, like, 2 of those guys, like you said, Chase Anderson, right, today, yep, and Seabold yesterday.
Chase Anderson and Connor Seabold yesterday.
Hat tip to those guys. Those guys were really good. But just the offense needs to, and they were close. Like I said, a Michael Conforto diving catch away maybe from changing the whole series, and some other plays as well. But the Giants bullpen was also just like spectacular, and they've been the best bullpen in the majors over the last month. And the last 2 games, 0 runs allowed. And when you can do that in Coors Field, that's gonna work. And the Rockies bullpen obviously is what kind of gave it up in the last couple games.
It's incredibly infuriating when your division rival can come in and maximize in your ballpark and do what you should be doing as an organization, but instead you don't do that. And like I said, go 32-9 over the last 3 seasons against your division rival. Let's wrap things up here on the show with, I'm curious how high you think the ceiling is for the Giants, and a couple of other Rockies Giants thoughts here, and bigger picture things here. We're going to do that coming up in segment number 3.
This episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. And the main thing to say about Bird Dogs, and I've said this a bunch of times, is that the moment I put them on, and this is what matters the most in a way, right? Because my girlfriend, she's got a good sense of style. And the moment I put these Bird Dogs on, they were sent to me, I put them on immediately. She said, these are the best looking shorts you have ever worn. Their stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. And that's exactly what they did to my legs. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so that you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. So we're talking comfort, we're talking style, and we're talking versatility, where you can wear these to pretty much any event because they look so classy and yet they're so comfortable. I know we want to be comfortable, but sometimes it's hard to get a mixture of looking classy and also being comfortable, but Bird Dogs accomplishes that. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB and enter promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti style tumbler, just like this one right here if you're watching on YouTube, with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you.
Want to thank you for making Locked On Rockies and Locked On Giants your first listen of the day. Here, want to thank Ben Kaspick for joining me here for a little post-series pod. A lot more fun for him in this one than I. Oh, man, that God, I just hate losing games like the Rockies did in those last two ones, man. Those ones just sting, and so I'm curious. I think this might be a way for the Giants to kind of kick off some momentum. I'm curious, how high is the ceiling for the Giants this season? Like we mentioned, we talked about the division. Winning the division isn't all that important. I'm just curious, where do you see this Giants team shaking out? Because the Padres might figure it out. They're running out of time. The Diamondbacks are going to be, I think, fighting along the way. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. How high can the Giants go this year?
I mean, I think if you're talking best case scenario, they could probably win 90 something games. I don't know, 94 or something, if everything just kind of clicks from here on out. More realistically, like maybe in the mid to high 80s. So, and you mentioned the Phillies, and that's exactly what they did last year, and that's exactly what they rode to the World Series. And so that's like, I mean, they really want to make the playoffs. And so I would imagine they're going to also be an aggressive team at the trading deadline. And so, but yeah, the ceiling, it's hard to ever put a ceiling on a team, especially after I witnessed 2021, like the
Right.
ceiling is just like bonker. I mean, at this point, being only 32-30, even if you played that way, you're already not obviously they're not winning 107, but I think they could be like, if you look back at like last year's Cleveland Guardians, for example, they were kind of middling. There's plenty of cases of teams that are, around 500, maybe even a little below. Even the Phillies last year, they fired Joe Girardi when I think they were like 22-29, and the 2019 Nationals were 19-31. And so there's plenty of times where you're kind of middling around 500 or worse after roughly 50 or 60 games, and you go on to end up having a really good season. And I mentioned the Guardians, they did that last year too, and they ended up winning 90 something games. And so I think the Giants are definitely a team, given how well the bullpen is now performing, given some of the starting pitchers they have. They've got some prospects who are actually like really intriguing that are close. And I think their lineup we saw in this series can be pretty darn tough, especially in that first game we saw it, but even with the comebacks in the other two. So yeah, I think some people might think 90 something wins. Yeah, right. But I honestly don't think it's like super unrealistic.
Well, especially like you said, with the way the season started for the Giants and where they've been able to work themselves back. When you're a significant amount of games under 500 and you work your way up, and then now after this series get above 500, it's exactly what I think the Giants are where they kind of quote unquote want to be here on the 8th of June. They've gotten their way out of the basement. They're getting in mid-season groove, and then the trade deadline's coming up. And so you mentioned are there certain holes maybe that you're thinking the Giants are looking to adjust? I mean, like you said, strong bullpen, arguably one of the best, if not the best closer in baseball right now. An offense that has interesting things. Another offseason where the Giants said, hey, Mitch Haniger, come on over here. Hey, Joc Pederson, come on over here. You guys can come still hit baseballs. We know you can. more great veterans that just come to San Francisco and thrive for a little bit. What do you think the Giants need to address at the deadline?
It's a good question. As of right now, there's not an obvious area of weakness, which is part of why I'm kind of feeling so optimistic. And they've got some question marks, like their catcher situation. You might have noticed, like who are these guys? Like you're looking at Patrick Bailey and Blake Sable catching in this series, and I think a lot of Rockies fans, you're used to Buster Posey, and then of course maybe you're some familiarity with Joey Bart.
Don't miss that guy at all. I can tell you, Buster Posey just hitting.
Oh yeah,
hitting 500.
We miss him terribly, but Patrick Bailey, I mean, he was a first round pick of theirs in 2020, and he made it to the majors just this year, and he's been really good. And so I could say catcher, except they've gotten good production out of these guys who have come up. And then, I mean, honestly, like maybe shortstop, but they, Brandon Crawford is still on this team, so that's kind of complicated, and their outfield is crowded. You could always go out and get like an ace caliber pitcher, and so that's like you've got Logan Webb, and then you've got like Alex Cobb, who is underrated, but he's not like Corbin Burns or something. And so, and then if the Angels fall apart and Shohei Ohtani is available, like I feel like you kind of just maybe do whatever you can to get that guy who's both an ace and an awesome hitter too. So it's weird because they have so much starting pitching depth and they have some good starting pitching prospects in the upper minors, but maybe, and I say Corbin Burns, but like I don't think the Brewers are at first place, so I don't know why they would trade him, but you get the point. Like maybe if there's an ace out there, that always can help you not just get to October, but win in October.
Yeah, and as for the Rockies, they got to sell. You have to trade as many veterans off this team as you can just to get draft picks, get some MLB ready arms, or get some arms that are going to be ready to go. Will they do that? Jury's still very much out on that. I think the Rockies still will avoid that 100-loss season still, especially with the way they played in May. It's going to be tough, I think, though, the navigating. I wish that we could feel a little bit more confident. There is stuff to be optimistic about on the Rockies side, but I wanted to ask you one last question, Ben. I didn't really think too much about this going into the season and kind of the role, but after this series and kind of some stuff, like I'm starting to think Bud Black might need to go. I'm wondering if you think this similar situation or how important a manager shift for a team like the Rockies might be.
I don't think it would make too much of a difference as long as the people above him are the same. And I don't want to come on here calling for people to sell or get fired or whatever, but
you can come on here and say sell the team. We're happy for that. Don't worry.
Mean, yeah. So like I know that they made a move and I forget what his name was, but that he left.
Bridich left after about 3 months after the Nolan Arenado trade. There was an interim season for a bit in which Bill Schmidt, who is the current GM, was the interim GM for a year, in which they didn't trade Trevor Story. They let John Gray walk, and then again didn't I think that, and then that was also the Chris Bryant season, I think, as well, or maybe the season after that. Anyway, I think they made some change, but Bill Schmidt is one of Dick Monfort's right-hand guys.
Yeah, and as long as that keeps happening, I think that not much is going to change. And so like you could fire Bud Black, but but I think he's got the respect of the players. He's one of those guys. It reminds me of Bochy. Bochy obviously had the respect of the players and the fans, and is a legend. And they might have a statue of Bruce Bochy at Oracle Park one day. And but even so, once the first domino to fall was the firing of the people in the front at the top of the front office. And then Bochy had one more year where they let him kind of say he was retiring, which obviously he wasn't. He was kind of being right. He read the room and understood like the new people in charge should get to pick their own manager. And so I think that worked out in the right way, and that it needs to come from a higher level. I don't think a manager makes, without change at the top, I don't think a manager makes that much of a difference. And also I think Bud Black is probably fine as a manager. He's not like he's not like actively costing you tons of wins left and right.
I think he's a little too trustworthy of his pitchers from time to time. And again, I'm really still wondering why Pierce Johnson continues to get save opportunities. And I think the only reason has to be because Daniel Bard doesn't feel ready for that role yet. Still trying to figure out everything up there. But I'm with you. I get frustrated by Bud Black, but Bud Black's not the problem. It goes down to the inactivity and the inactions of this team from the top, and needs to change from the top down completely. I think the Rockies could be a team that would be a really exciting team for if they were to sell or they were to move on. I think the Rockies would be a team that people would be ecstatic to get involved in, because I think there's people in baseball hungry and ready to crack the Coors Field code and make this a place where the Rockies are that powerhouse that they think they are. But Ben, we could keep going on. We got tons more to talk about. Sure, this won't be the last time we chat here this season, but Giants sweeping away the Rockies. Let me just put the whole record, probably flip it over, and I'll set it to the same tune for next time. Because golly, this team just kicks the snot out of the Rockies. Ben, thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go here to stay up to date with all things Giants, all things you?
Well, I do the daily show just like you, Locked On Giants on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and I'm on Twitter, pretty active, kind of like the stats and all that, but in a way that's very digestible, and that's on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, and you can see if you're on YouTube, Kaspick. And then what about for you? Where can my listeners find you?
Check us out live streaming almost every episode on Locked On Rockies. You can be part of the live chat, just like Ryan Tartlesky and Joel DeGrace, some of my everydayers here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. Also, LO Rockies on Twitter, Paul Holden 33. Talk a lot about Mario baseball there, too, in case you're curious about the fictional world of the Mushroom Kingdom. But I do want to say one thing. Ben does a great job of breaking down stats and a great job of bringing those analytical things to a more digestible thing. If you want to get a deeper understanding of the Rockies' opponent, I highly suggest following Ben. And I highly suggest making sure you tune into Locked On Rockies and Locked On Giants each and every day. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. You can see us on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app as well, where we're also there. So check us out wherever you get your podcast. And folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Podcast Network.